Hello everyone, I hope that you're having a wonderful day. Today I'm going to teach you how to paint this cute little wildflower postcard. I'll list all of the supplies that you'll need in the description box, but first off you're going to need some washi tape, some water, a paper towel to blot off your paintbrush, of course a paintbrush, as well as your paints and your gouache. I haven't shown that in the video yet, but I will show it a little bit later what brand I use. You're first of all going to put your washi tape on your little postcard. I've just bought these postcards that have deckled edges off of Amazon. Then I'm mixing up a nice pale blue colour. I'm using quite a large brush to brush that lightly on. You don't want a very heavy colour here, so keep a lot of water in your paints and make sure it's just a really light wash of this one. I'm starting to make a gradient as I go down the paper, and that will make a nice little background for our wildflowers. I added a touch of purple in the top there, so it just creates a little bit more interest in that gradient. I really like the purple effect with the blue. I used a hairdryer to completely dry my piece, but once it is dry, you can remove all of your washi tape. This is really satisfying sometimes. I love the crisp edges that it makes. Now I'm making a pinkish red color, so I'm going to start mixing that on my little palette. I hardly ever wash off my palette, so I will often have these colors that I have left over from previous projects, and I can just reactivate the colors that are already in those wells. But this one I added a little bit more red to. I've used a kind of magenta color and more of a warm red to create this one. And I go straight in on the piece and go back and forth, make this back and forth motion to make the petals, kind of like how I would do with lavender, but a little bit more haphazard, I guess. I just kind of pick where I want to put these little flowers all over my piece, but if you wanted to map them out first, make sure you use a really light pencil so that you don't see it through the final piece. I always leave these little gaps in my flowers as well because it's not going to be the same all the way down. You're just going to want to throw these little dots back and forth all over the page. Always kind of make sure that you keep in mind where the stems are going to go. So if you want them, I guess, shooting out from the same spot or more from the side, I've got them coming out of the center. But yeah, make sure you kind of keep that in mind when you're putting down your flowers. I'm now going in with a bluish purple color, so I've mixed a bit of purple and a bit of blue together, and I'm doing the same thing and making sure that when you are putting them next to each other that the previous ones have fully dried first. Otherwise you're going to get some interesting bleeds, which maybe you want in your piece, so maybe you can experiment with that, but I wanted mine to be separate. These definitely don't have to be perfect, and it doesn't look like much right now, but trust the process, it will get better by the end. I'm finishing off that purple layer now, and I made sure to dry it with my hairdryer to speed up the process, but you can let it air dry if you like as well. Just be careful if you do use a hairdryer and you are putting it on very wet paint, that it might cause some smudges and smears. Now that I'm going in with my green color and a very thin brush, I actually did change the brush because I realized that the first one I was using was too thick. So I'm going in with a very thin brush and putting in the green stems. But I do kind of realize partway through this that I wanted to put some white flowers in first. My original idea was to do it afterwards. So I do break out the gouache very, very soon. But until then, you can enjoy me doing some little green stems. You can do it in whichever order that you please, but I would suggest doing all of the flowers first so you can kind of figure out where exactly you want to put the stems and where you don't, because the other paint may not cover it. I'm using Winsor& Newton's gouache. It's not my favorite gouache. I do like whole bean better, but this one is fine for what we're using it for. You just might need a few layers because it's not as opaque as some other gouache paints. I'm going in and doing some white flowers in the same way, making sure the paint is pretty thick because I know this one is a little bit more transparent than some other gouache paints that I've used. But yeah, and then I go back to my grass once I've put in those flowers so I can kind of work around them and do very, very little brush strokes. And this part, it can be pretty fun because you're just kind of making a mess almost. Just put brush strokes wherever your heart desires. I am pretty sure I've said that in every single tutorial that I've done here on YouTube. I'm gonna have to go back and check because I just like telling you to put paint where your heart desires. I'm like the watercolor Bob Ross. Once we are finished with that, I'm going to go in with some shadows on the flowers. So starting with the pinkish red ones, I'm kind of creating these little mini U shapes, I guess, just on one side of the flower and putting a few little dots on the other side just to give it dimension. It's going to make it look a little bit more like what we want it to look like with the little wildflowers, give it some depth and 3D effect. But yeah, so don't overdo this part, just make sure that it's on that one side and use very little dots and little U shapes. Of course, now going in with the purple and doing all of those purple flowers as well. One thing that I do like to do is kind of throw some little dots here and there, just randomly within that grassy area. I think it makes it look a little bit more, I don't want to say abstract because it doesn't look abstract, it just looks, I don't know, it just looks better. Just trust me, just do it, okay? So we use darker variations of the blue and the red flowers for the shadows, but for the white flowers, we're going to be using a very light blue color. So I mixed the gouache with some blue watercolor and I'm going through and putting the same shadows on the white just with some blue. We of course also have to put shadows into our grass, so I've made a darker color green, which I got by mixing red and kind of more like a foresty green. So before I was using a bit of a moss green so I could use it straight from my little pan, but this one I had to mix. So yeah, I've used a bit of a forest green and I mixed the warm red with that as well. I'm just going through and adding some little brush strokes. Obviously don't be too excessive here, not as many as you have in the lighter color, just to add a little bit more dimension and depth into your piece. And yeah, I also add the little dots that I told you to add before here as well, just because it looks better, okay? Just do it, okay? I also go in with the gouache over the top of the flowers, just plain white gouache to give it a little bit extra highlights. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, if you're liking the piece how it is, but I think it just adds that little bit extra 3D dimension, whatever you would like to call it, in your piece. I am going in finally with some gold paint just to make it a little magical, a little bit of a sparkle and have a really cute magical wildflower piece. Maybe it could be pollen. Maybe it's the pollen that's floating off of the flowers. And now you have a perfect little wildflower painting for all of your bees. Maybe they're imaginary bees, but I hope you enjoyed the process. If you do try it out, then please tag me on Instagram. I would love to see your creations, and thank you so much for watching. Fare thee well, everyone. Bye.